Oh, great.
Boom, I think we're live on the internet right now. And I will bring this up real quick. There we go. There's both of us now. Nick, you're live.
Yeah.
Are you excited about
Oh,
this?
yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
Oh, no, are you excited about this?
Oh, yeah. Loads. Absolute loads. What are we going to talk about?
I don't know. That was what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. We can talk about any number of things. We can talk about training. We can talk about...
Well, we're going to talk about... Basically, I'm just testing this to see how this works. Okay. So we're... Basically, what I've got set up here...
Talk about traffic on the road.
Basically, what I've got set up here is I've got dual screen, so you are on here. I am on here.
Yeah, you're glitching on me.
What's on?
I said you're glitching on my end.
Well, it's probably just because of the amount of data that's being sent in and out.
True.
I'm going to click on the live screen. There we are. Yeah, you look good, Nick. And it looks like it's running smooth. The problem is you would have to have an additional like phone or a computer set up so that we could go through and take a look at my screen at the same time, so we could talk a little bit about training at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, they give me about 10 minutes. Right now I'm stuck in that Park Road traffic.
Okay. So Nick, tell me about like your summer training and what it focuses on with your throwers.
Summer training of throwers. So really what we're doing right now is we're doing a lot of prep work as far as like work capacity development, working a little bit with stability and strength. And then we're about to move into more of a power strength output for the next 3 weeks leading up to start when we get a test finally with kids. So early in the summer, we went with a 4-week work capacity development, utilizing things like slight German volume, a little bit reduction from total volume, just kind of keep kids healthy, keep them fresh, but keep them working hard, especially over the time period. Moving forward, went to stability. We looked at what time under tension training utilized by Charles Poliquin and people out of Ashland, especially because muscle tension and everything goes up. We love that because we get a little bit more hypertrophy, getting some size to some very underdeveloped athletes. And moving into this next one, we're going to look at how we can put everything together for force output leading into our testing, start us off for the season.
I was going to say, tell me a little bit about... No, swatch. Tell me a little bit about what your philosophy is driven by, like who you actually derive most of your stuff from. And I don't feel like you need to name drop, but think about what is the foundation of most of your training, like if that makes any sense. So I'll just let you take that and run with it, and you can just talk about it and tell me.
A lot of our training, a lot of stuff that I utilize as far as like really kind of linking to is with Charles Poliquin. I mean, the man developed over 800 Olympians, stuff like that, and really the core principles of push-pull, keeping the body balanced and stuff, and utilize things like timer and tension. I mean, as far as injury reduction, strength development, I mean, it's almost second to none. And then another one I really like to utilize is dealing more out of like West Side Barbell with the conjugate, and as far as like overspeed eccentrics, force output, just because the forced output is one of the most key and essential things in the throws. And if you can develop ligaments to be extremely elastic, I mean, you can't beat that. And then also, I haven't found another training system that will develop a student athlete as rapidly as far as like a 3-wave pendulum in the conjugate, as far as getting absolute strength up, getting their overall strength level, and their dynamic speed up.
What now? You hit on something there. how do you measure your force output other than just like the amount of weight, that you're lifting? How else do
Yeah.
you measure that? You know what I mean?
So measurables, we will look at about every 4 weeks, just because it takes 21 to 28 days to adapt to any adaptation. So when we're going into it, we'll look at 3 weeks of work, 4th week as testable, or maybe even to the 5th week if we extend the period a little bit longer. But usually we'll test after certain periods, just because testing all the time is very hard on the body, and it also does not allow us that kind of opportunity to really focus on learning.
So what is the most specific, I mean, we're talking about testing. What's the most specific, I guess, how about this? Talk about specificity in training, right? One of the things that I struggle with all the time is when I'm talking to basically strength coaches, and we're a little bit different because we coach strength and conditioning, and then we have a specific task in mind. How do you make sure that what you're doing in the weight room doesn't get too far away from the specific task or the application of that, you know what I mean, like on the track? Because a lot of times, like, I was listening to a talk yesterday where Dan Paff was talking to Stu. I always get Stu Melby's name stuck in my head, a guy that coached at University of Minot up in North Dakota. But Stu, I can't think of his name, he's with Altus. But they were talking about, how strong is strong enough? How do we get strong? Things like that. And one of the things that they were talking about, if you've got a greyhound athlete, which you probably don't if you're a thrower, what are ways that guy gets strong outside the weight room? And one of those ways is plyometrics. How are we developing strength? Because in reality, is a squat really specific enough? A lot of times a strength and conditioning coach will be like, I'm going to have you lift to make you, protect you from injury. But in my experience with a kid that actually runs on a regular basis, that's fake news. That doesn't exist, right? There is no exercise where you can get strong enough where you're not going to get hurt. So, I mean, talk a little bit. You're a little bit different because your kids are almost like a shot put is super close to a clean and jerk, right? It's just like you're putting it all together. So talk a little bit about that and how you maybe do those things.
All right. In regards for us, as far as specificity and development on that, we'll really, I'm about to go dark here for a second.
That's fine.
There we go. So looking at specificity, yes, the squat is not an absolute perfect. It does give us the ability to measure and kind of develop absolute strength, but absolutely plyometrics are one of the key fundamentals as far as development in that, as far as seeing our force and rate output. So usually what we'll see, especially in the training I utilize, plyometrics are utilized a lot in the sense that we'll start early, really kind of develop as time goes. Other specificities we really look at are like the Olympic lifts, especially because Olympic lifts, you're going to find the higher correlation for us as far as thrower, things like the clean, the snatch, depending on what your specific event is. Other utilized things we can look at are, like if we have the ability, we have a force plate, we can sit there and measure kind of how fast bar speeds and stuff like that are moving. And then we can measure specificity as far as muscle recruitment, how dynamically they can move.
So let me ask you this. You talked about dynamic movement, okay? And you're talking about how do you measure movement quality in the weight room, and what are ways that you evaluate, other than the specific task, what are other ways to evaluate the quality of movement in your athletes, and how do you enhance that throughout the year?
I'm back. The freeze on us?
Yeah, it froze on us. I see that it's locking up here, but give me a moment, and I think it'll come back. What do you get off the QU Wi-Fi?
I'm trying to.
What?
I'm trying to link to the Wi-Fi so at least I can have a stronger connection.
Well, I think. Okay. it killed our connection here for a moment. I don't really know. Oh, there we go. We're back. Um, okay, so let's rephrase the question. How do you uh, look at and evaluate movement quality with your athletes on a regular basis? So, for example, no, I'll just let you answer that question.
All right. With movement quality, we're going to look at a couple key things. Is first and foremost is the mobility of how they're moving in space. If they look very rigid in anything, then the quality is going to be down. If the technique does not look like you can execute it 100%, then quality is beginning to drop. Another thing we're going to look at is rate of the bar. As fast as the bar is moving. If you're moving at a relatively quick pace, we know that the quality is going to be a little bit not perfect, but it's going to be about good enough. But over a period, we'll sit there and there's a lot of things you can use, like tendos, and they have all those other fancy contraptions. Here at Queens, even though we don't have that, me, you, and others have been doing this long enough, we can see that stuff with our eyes and see what's kind of the issue, where things are, and really being able to determine kind of the pure quality of the movement.
Nick, why don't you go sit in front of that backdrop? You are moving so much that when you move, that means the pixels have got to change, and the more the pixels change, the more that it cranks up the bandwidth that it's using. There you go. Why don't you go sit over there, turn the lights on, get yourself all set up, look fancy.
Yeah, I got the banners in the back, championship banners.
Yep.
Person that we do not know.
Yep.
Who is this person, by the way? We found this
Don't know yet. I got to send a picture of that to Fee and let her kind of check it out and tell us what she thinks about it. But I guess, let me ask you this. What are the qualities that you're looking for in a student athlete that you are trying to improve or change in a year-to-year basis? Does that make sense?
Okay. Certain things we're trying to improve and change. First thing is probably going to be mobility. A lot of people have functional movement issues, stuff like that. So mobility is going to be one of the first things as far as like ligament extension, especially in like discus, squatting even. I mean, typically we'll see, especially like a high schooler coming in, the range of motion in the squat. They're used to quarter squats versus actually gaining depth and gaining the full range of motion in there. Another things are absolute strength, because that's neural recruitment, that's muscle fibers that you can recruit, and move weight, because 500 pounds for you is 500 pounds for me. The only thing is the amount of muscles you can recruit determine how much force you can apply to the bar and move the bar and create change. And then the other thing we're looking at is kind of that explosive reactive strength potential. If somebody's not got the ability to really kind of control eccentrically, isometrically contract, and explode concentrically, those are things that we can grow and develop here in our time period.
So tell me a little bit, what's your experience with kids, and how does that translate, if that makes sense? So like you've increased those qualities. Do you see a direct correlation with how far they throw?
So correlation-wise, may or may not be perfect. Depends on how you're going to do your technique and how their technique is looking at the current point in time. All these are tools to sit there and help improve the ability for you to throw projectile objects further. If you don't have the proper technique, which fortunately here at Queens, my boss, who I am talking to right now, pays me full-time to do it right, that our kids actually do learn how to apply those techniques and use those adaptations to throw objects further. But yeah, all these characteristics are nothing more than tools that kind of help.
Okay, so what are things that you're trying to do that maybe talk about, like, what do you do differently than other people that you see on a regular basis? Can you talk to that a little bit?
What we do differently here?
Well, I mean, let's say there's another coach, and they...
Breaking up.
Give me 1 second. Okay, let's say there's another coach, right? Boy, it is breaking up, isn't it? What do you do differently than other people?
I think I won't speak for all coaches. I think one main thing that I do differently is really trying to use a approach as far as everything we do is seeing throwing not as like it's a sport and everything, but seeing it as like a very complex lift and utilizing some teaching methods that really hit neurologically home that we learned from like Bush, Schnitzler, Derek Yosh and them, where we'll start out and instead of us going rushing right to trying to get you to project the object, we'll start more bare bone essential to what certain characteristics and start very kind of piece and partial and moving to holistically. So when we get towards the end of the season, we're not going to be sitting there breaking down, the strike, the stand through. We did that stuff all in the beginning. They know how to neurologically. And so what we're going to do towards the end is we're really just going to focus on the big major key things and macro motions.
Do you take student athletes through the same progression every year?
With me, no. We will go based upon the level of ability. So my freshman is going to spend more time and a lot more detail in kind of the more simplistic things because they're not better at that or optimal at that. With the higher end kids, we'll kind of go a little bit more advanced just because they're at that skill level and training age where they can do that. And for us to go backwards is to correct their progression.
So when you teach the throw, do you subscribe more so to a part whole or a whole part method?
Usually we'll go from part whole.
Can you be more specific and talk about that?
All right. So to be more specific, when we're going through, and we'll use stop. So if we're coming into this and we're looking at partial, we'll do things such as extension of the hip, extension of all the knee, the ankle, and all the micro motions to it, elbow up, through. And as we progress, and to link them and create bigger, complex motions, to that full motion, then we'll do things for those. Heavier weight training and sometimes lighter weight training create adaptations such as like overspeeding and stuff like that.
So let me ask you this. What do you think of Bondarchuk's book that he has written about maximal strength levels required, and how does that apply to your training? And I guess I should ask if you're familiar with it, first of all.
So dealing with Bondarchuk's transfer training and stuff like that, I'm not an expert in. I'm definitely, I understand and know kind of the general gist.
Okay, so have you seen Bondarchuk's book, The Transfer of Training?
What's that?
Have you seen Bondarchuk's book, The Transfer of Training?
Yep.
Okay, so in that book, he basically says that if you do an incline bench press, it transfers this much to shot put, right?
Yeah. The question you're asking is what my thoughts are?
I haven't gotten to a question yet. I'm asking if you know what I'm talking about. Am I losing you with the audio?
Every time you go, you're moving down and the pixels are just freezing on me.
Yep.
And the audio is taking in and out.
Okay, so I don't know if I can switch this a little bit here to maybe get rid of that. Okay, tell me if are we doing better with it now?
A little bit better.
Okay, so first of all, if you're watching this is my Instagram handle, JimmyJam1883. 1983 was taken. That's the year that I was born. 36 years old. So now it all makes sense. My name is Jim Vahrenkamp, obviously. We're with Nick Green today, our throws coach here at Queen's University of Charlotte, and we're just talking a little bit about training. And we're talking about we're to the point now where we're talking about transfer of training, because a lot of times kids have this belief that if I get really good at the squat, that's going to make them really fast, which is not true. Those are two totally different qualities. Number one for me, the velocity of the movement is super important, and the more specific the movement, okay, the more transfer there is. So for example, the most specific movement you can do when it comes to running is run. Most specific movement you can do for jumping is jump. And then as we work through those progressions, how close the actual velocity of the jump is to the finished product is how specific it is and how much transfer there is. So short jumps or short progressions don't necessarily guarantee a transfer. So I guess that's what I'm talking about, Nick, is can you talk a little bit about like half throws, part throws, and how that transfers in, and then thinking about movements that you do in the weight room, what are specific things, what are plyometrics you do that transfer well? How much of that did you hear?
Yeah.
Yes?
Sorry. You go ahead.
Okay, well, I just wanted to try this. I wanted to see how this would work. This is our first attempt at having another coach on here and doing this via FaceTime and combining all that stuff. So I'm going to go back through and review the video and review the feed. And Nick, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. We're excited to get more coaches in here and have longer conversations, especially because I've got a lot of friends all over the United States that are really great coaches, and I really want to be able to give them the opportunity to talk about training and share that information with you guys out there. So thank you very much. Nick, thank you, and have a great day, bud. Bye, Nick.
Bye.